Who doesn't love stories? Exciting ones, scary ones, and even funny ones. Our featured author for today is Natasha Deen, and she embraces her cultural diversity and harnesses the art of relatable storytelling. Natasha Deen's work has been nominated for several awards, and her novel, The Signs and Wonders of Tuna, Rashad, was nominated for the CBC Top 14 Canadian Young Adult Books to Watch. Don't go away, we will be right back.
Thanks for having me on your live show. It was really my pleasure. Your production is just fantastic. Unbelievable how you guys are pulling that off. So organized with segments and transitions and all those different things. Right in line with what I'm talking about in my new book, Going Live, live streaming your podcast to reach more people. Hopefully people tune in for our conversations. Definitely worth the on-demand version, in my opinion, if I may say so myself. You guys are awesome.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months, and this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach call bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It looks fantastic.
I love your introduction. How professional. That sounds, I feel like I'm on a beautiful show here.
Folks, welcome.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.
Oh my goodness, Ross, thank you so much.
Thanks. And, this is one of the most fun interviews that I've ever done. So thank you, Bridgetti.
Big pleasure. Ross, take care.
Thank you.
And welcome back, everyone. You're watching Books with Bridgetti. I'm your host, Bridgetti Lim Banda from Cape Town in South Africa. The stream today is made possible by StreamYard and Live Media. Now, I have got an amazing guest waiting in the studio for us, Natasha Deen. But before I welcome her, welcome to all of you, whether you are watching us over on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, on LinkedIn, and also over on Amazon Live. A very, very warm welcome to you. And if you're catching the show on the play, welcome to you too. Great to have you here. One of the things that I'm very, very passionate about and that I do at the beginning of every single show is to just share one or two ways in which you can level up. Now, if you are an author, thanks to the pandemic, many have had to pivot and they've had to learn how to talk about their books online as opposed to doing book launches and book promotions in libraries and schools. Some of that is opening up, but I think the hybrid way is going to stay here. And this actually a good thing. I always like in other shows I talk about doing business without walls, and it's pretty much the same thing if you are an author. So instead of you only reaching your local audience by going to a library or a school, when you talk about your book online, you can now reach a global audience. It opened up doors for authors to connect with people all over the world. And this is one of the reasons why I started the show. So we can introduce, because I'm in South Africa, and the authors that I've had on the show has been from different countries. So they get to meet my audience locally, and I get to meet their audience wherever they are. So all round, it's a win-win. You get to introduce your book to people in different countries, and that's what I love about this. So one of the things, as I mentioned, I like doing is to teach people how to level up when they are live. So when you go live to talk about your book on TikTok, for example, or Instagram, you would hold your phone like that in portrait mode. And that's 100% correct, because it uses the entire screen real estate when you go live on TikTok or on Instagram. But if you're going live to talk about your book on any of the other platforms, like, for example, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook Live. What you want to do is to go into the settings on your phone, and the same will apply whether you're doing this on Android or iOS, it doesn't matter. Go into settings and turn off your rotation lock. That will allow you to turn your phone into landscape mode. So if you ever wondered what those black lines on the sides of your screen are when your phone is in portrait mode, this will get rid of it. It'll actually open up the entire screen for you. And so you can easily talk about your book, and people can see you, and you can use your hands. And the reason why you can do that is because you also want to put your phone onto a tripod. There are tons of tripods. You can literally take your pick when it comes to tripods. The iOgrapher is great because you can use it both ways. But again, as I said, there are tripods out there that you can choose from. There's a huge variety. If you wanted to do a walkabout with your book and them sort of behind the scenes, something like the DJI Osmo would be really, really nice to use. And if you really just want to level up, before I get to that point, here's a quick tip. If you are on the move somewhere, you're in a hotel room, you're traveling, and you want to go live and talk about your book, but you don't have your tripod with you, you forgot it at home or something like that. A quick tip is take your phone and literally with press stick or some sticky tape, tape your phone to the window. And the reason why that works beautifully is you're going to have front-facing light. Natural light is the best thing out there, because if you don't have front-facing light, you're going to appear very dark, and your audience isn't going to see you. So that's a very good tip. And if you want to level up a little bit further, what you can do is use something like a lavalier microphone. And again, you've got, there are so many choices of clip-on microphones that you can use, and that'll just give you a better quality sound than the built-in sound that you will have. The other thing you can do is, now these, I must admit, these are the Shure microphones. If you want to cut out the chances of having background noise or feedback, because that very often happens. These are the Shure microphones. The sound quality on these are fantastic, but I struggle with a fit for myself. That's just me, but they're great. My favorite go-to are still the Apple ones. I love the way they fit into my ears. So I'm a little bit partial. Anyway, so those are a few quick tips for you when it comes to leveling up when you are online talking about your book. Back to my amazing guest for today. Natasha Deen is a multi-genre award-winning author, and she teaches introduction to children's writing at the University of Toronto. So she's in Canada, I'm in Cape Town. Isn't that amazing? She's published over 30 books for children, young adults, and adults. Her young adult novel, In the Key of Nira Ghani, won the 2020 Amy Mathis Teen Book Award. Also, her novel, and this is one of the books we'll talk about today, The Signs and Wonders of Tuna, Rashad, was nominated CBC Top 14 Canadian Young Adult Books to Watch. So let's give a hearty warm welcome to my guest, Natasha Deen. Natasha, welcome to the show. So glad that you're able to join me today to talk about two of your books. So welcome. Are you well?
I am. I am. Hello, Bridgetti, and hello to our viewing and listening audience. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to share this time with all of you.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So how did you get to, I mean, you've already authored over 30 books, and that's huge because I've had an author on the show who took 30 years to write his book, but he's now published. How did you get into writing? And 30 books is quite something to have achieved in a relatively short space of time. Where did your love for writing come from? Is it something that you were always interested in? Is it something your parents developed, a teacher? How did you get into writing?
I, those are really, really great questions. I've always loved stories, and I'm going to differentiate the idea of writing from story because writing is one of the ways that we tell a story. But, we can tell a story orally, we can act it out, we can draw it. And so my love of stories starts very young. Part of our culture in Guyanese and part of our culture is that we are a storytelling culture. So you grow up with your elders telling you stories of your family history or, just sort of funny things that are going on. And the ability to hold that audience live is something that you start young learning how to do. And then when it came and then I just sort of loved all of it. And then when it came to the writing, yes, my teachers and my parents did feel that I had a what's the word I'm thinking of, like a tendency towards it, not necessarily a talent, but a tendency towards it. But when I asked around, how do you become an author? Nobody knew. So I figured it was maybe just something people lucked into, kind of like winning the lottery. So I decided I was going to go forward and pursue psychology. That was actually the thing I was studying in university. And then it was through my studies that I realized how much the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we accomplish sort of influences and colors how we see reality. And really, it really sort of speaks to how we think we're going to live our lives. If we think that if I do this thing, good things will happen, or if I work hard, all of those things. And then I thought, nope, that's where I need to go. I need to dive into stories and walk away from academics and psychology. And that's what started it. It was just the fascination with how we tell ourselves stories and how we tell each other stories and how stories build the world we see.
That's a very interesting thing. I don't think any other author that I've interviewed in over 4 years has actually mentioned that, the difference between storytelling and writing per se. And I picked up on that because I'm in Africa, and a lot of the African cultures is passed through storytelling, sort of intergenerational storytelling. The grandmother typically talking to her grandchildren and passing down the history and the cultural values. And that's how things are communicated and move forward. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that person knows how to write. So you are correct. There is a difference.
Yes.
And so you've actually gone to university and now you
Yeah.
actually
Sorry.
teach writing.
I do. And yeah, you're absolutely right because I teach adults and I teach children as well. And it's really, especially with kids who are learning how to write, it's really important when I go in there to differentiate that for them and the way I explain it to them is that writing is the plate and story is the food. But you can carry, in the same way you can carry food on a plate, you can put it on a napkin, you can put it on a spoon, like there's different ways. And especially for young writers, age-wise, that's a really helpful thing because they're still learning. Like if you can remember how frustrating it was when you were learning how to print, and if you learned cursive, how to do cursive, right? And spelling, and there's all of these extra things that sort of lean on us, and it can really impact on how we feel we tell stories because we're mixing up two different things, right? And especially, and with adults, it's kind of the same thing, that writing is just going to be the skill you build on, but storytelling, that's something we all have an innate ability to do. It's just going to be honing and focusing it. And for me, that's really important because otherwise, we don't explore our creativity, we don't explore our imagination, and we end up feeling like we are less than when really we're not. It's just writing is hard and it can be boring. But stories are awesome, and that's why we sit in our chairs for such long times and long periods, because stories are always worth it.
Yeah. How do you encourage, I think thankfully the days are behind us where parents didn't encourage children to speak freely. I think we have pivoted into a time where we encourage our children to tell us things instead of saying, this is adult conversation, or, your voice is not important. Um, how has that, do you think that in, just that shift in how we talk to our children encourages them to write? As a parent, how can you encourage your child to write when they start telling stories? My mind's been blown so often. I've come across one or two instances where children as young as 6, 7 start writing a book. And, I often wonder, why don't we have more children? Why aren't we encouraging more children to learn to love writing from an early age? Because all children should have that ability.
Yeah, and we really are. I mean, you listen to little kids tell you a story, and there's sort of these like giant epics, right? No one just ties their shoe. No one just finds a caterpillar. It's a whole thing behind it. And so when we're looking at encouraging kids to explore that writing and that storytelling, it's really important. I say this with all love to all the adults out there. It's really important to take our egos out of it. And it's really important to take our standards of what a good story or writing is out of it, because you are not the storyteller, you are the listener, and it is the child who is telling that story. And so quite often what I find sometimes is that parents, adults can get ahead of themselves because they want the child to write an entire page. Write me a page of a story. That's not much. Well, that's not much for you, but for this kid, that could be, you may as well be telling them to write 300 pages, right? So start small, right? Well, how does your story start? Give me that sentence. Oh, really? Okay, what happened next? And when I go in and I'm working with kids, we always start with 3 stories. 3 sentences. Give me one sentence that tells me how your story starts. Give me one sentence that tells me how the story gets worse. And then give me one sentence on how it solves itself, right? How does the story problem solve itself? And then we expand from there. Because really, I mean, I say this to adults too. If you can tell a story in 3 sentences, that's all you need. It's a beginning, middle, end. Boom, you're done. You're done. And so, so starting there, start small and encourage and celebrate, the things that they've done right. Don't read that and go, oh, well, you misspelled this, you misspelled that. You've taken the joy out of it. Glory in that giant misspelled description of how blue the sky is. And then also, again, like, let kids write what they want to write. I remember running into a parent one time, and her child was a really beautiful writer. I mean, rough and whatever, as we all are when we're first telling whatever that story is. And she came to me afterwards and she said, I think this is the kind of story he should be writing. Not this, but this other thing. And I think it should be like this. I should give it that, and I could see him deflating behind her the more she talked. And I just smiled when she was done. I said, I think what you're telling me is that that's a story you need to write, But what you need to do is give him space to write the stories he wants to write, because actually he's quite a talented storyteller. And he just sort of, because there was someone else stepping in and saying what we all kind of know as readers, right? Every author has their own voice. Every author has a certain style of story they want to tell. And if we try to shove them into other places, it may not work out. And then, especially for young writers, they never get out of the gate. And that's a sad thing, because the world needs all of our stories. That's how the world changes. That's how the world gets better. Oh, Bridgetti, you're muted.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the signs and wonders of Tuna, Rashad. Now, I was immediately drawn to the cover.
It's a great cover.
Tell me a little bit about, before we even get into the story, tell me a little bit about the cover, because it's a very striking cover. Who designed that for you? What was your input into the final product?
Oh, so that was my amazing Running Press team, my Running Press Kids team, and they're lovely. So they come and they ask you, okay, what do you think Tuna looks like, and what do you think is happening here, and we collaborate, and then they go and do their magic, and they'll come back and go, okay, well, what do you think? And I think it's amazing, right? I mean, we both think it's amazing. And with Tuna, there's an element of magical realism in the story, because Tuna is looking to her ancestors to help guide her through two different things. First, she's trying to figure out a way to ask her crush out on a date. And second, her older brother, Robbie, his husband has died suddenly, and Robbie is drowning in his grief. So Tuna is looking to the ancestors to help her with both of these things. And throughout the book, she takes signs and wonders from the butterflies that appear, and she interprets messages. So that's why the butterflies are there. And are you still there, Bridgetti? You've disappeared from my view.
We've just got a little bit of a technical difficulty going on, and hopefully we will get Natasha to join us again very shortly. One of those things that happens, and there's Natasha.
Hello. I don't know what happened.
Hello
I was
again.
there, and then I was not.
Oh my goodness. It is what it is. We are dependent on the internet, and sometimes life just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but it is a striking cover. Now, something that jumped out at me, and particularly because I am in Africa with so many cultural diversities, it's nice to see an image on a book that is how was it received, that you've got a book that is representative of your culture. I look at videos of girls when they get a doll that looks like them. It just makes them beam with happiness, and I think it's so important to embrace the cultures around us. In South Africa, for example, we've got 11 different official languages. And when you greet somebody in their native language, you just see this big smile on people's faces, because, it's like an acknowledgement of who they are. It's showing respect for that, for their culture. So how important was it for you to do this with this book?
It's always important for me to represent any cultural community that my character is. It's really important to represent it. And you're right, because I get a lot of emails from readers who say things like, "This is the first time I've seen myself in a book," or "Thank you for having like a dark-skinned girl." You know, and that's huge. You know, that her hair hasn't been like, "Thank you for letting her have natural hair." Those kinds of things. It's really like, it's huge, right? I mean, we know we exist, we know we matter in the world, but when we see reflections of ourselves, when we have that person who says hello to us in our own language, it is such a validation of, you know, our worth. And even though we know we're not supposed to want external validations, you know, it is still nice when someone acknowledges our humanity, our humanness. And so, yeah, I love that Tuna is, you know, clearly represented on that front cover.
I think we're just naturally drawn to people who take extra care to find out about our culture and how we like to be greeted or treated. And you know, it's just there's differences or nuances in every culture that's unique to that culture. And when we interact with those people, just to be able to, and thankfully, you know, we can Google just about anything these days. We really have no excuse not to acknowledge someone else's culture or to show respect for their culture. You know, we can no longer say I didn't know, because we've got access to the internet, and that's just an amazing thing, you know. And do you actually have a copy of the book with you?
Yeah,
I think
no, it's true. And I don't know if you've noticed. Oh, sorry, Bridgetti. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've noticed this tracking in middle grade and young adult books, but one of the very cool things now, too, is when the character speaks in their own language and they don't translate it, they just speak in their language and then they leave it up to the reader to get the clues. And I love that because it's exactly what you're saying. We have the internet. If I really want to know what this character is saying, word for word, I can look it up. I can Google it. So, and I just think that's huge, right? If you speak French and you're reading a book where there's French phrases in it and they don't translate it, it is such a subtle acknowledgement of you. Hey man, you speak this language. I don't gotta translate it for you. You know, oh yeah, thank you. Right? It's a small thing that I think means quite a lot.
Absolutely, it means huge thing. So, Natasha, would you mind reading us a section out of the book? We'll take a very quick break, and when we come back, if you could read us something out of the book, just to give an audience an idea of what they'll find in the book. And if you are watching us over on Amazon Live, you will notice that the book is in the carousel. So please do grab a copy of Natasha Deen's book on Amazon. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get a brief extract from the book. And welcome back. You're watching Books with Bridgetti. My name is Bridgetti Lim Banda, and my amazing guest for today is Natasha Deen. She's going to read us an excerpt from her book, The Signs and Wonders of Tuna, Rashad. This book was nominated CB Top 14 Canadian Young Adult Books to watch, and it's got a gorgeous cover. So, Natasha, if you can just read us an excerpt from the book, that'll be wonderful.
Absolutely. So in this scene, Tuna's older brother Robbie has come over for dinner, and this is problematic for Tuna because Robbie's over all the time, and she knows that he is not coming. Like he's drowning, and he's becoming overbearing because he worries about everybody, to the point where it's just suffocating the whole family. And so she is, you know, she's headed upstairs. She wants to grab her quilt. And one of the things that's happened in the household now is that whenever Robbie is over, all the photos of David have to be hidden because it upsets him too much to see it. So in this scene, Tuna is back in her bedroom, and she's debating sort of, you know, this thing about going to the ancestors for help. This is how we start. As soon as the screen fades to black, I hop from the chair, babble something about needing the bathroom, and race upstairs. I close the bedroom door, then I'm on the floor, lifting my duvet and gently pulling out the frame that holds the collage. Along the edges are butterflies made of metallic paper and paint, and even under the ceiling light, they glow with intricate beauty. The most gorgeous ones are the ones that Mom made, but mine aren't too bad. I check each of them and double check, ensuring their wings didn't suffer. Butterflies. Did I love them first, or did he make me love them? I wipe the glass with the hem of my dress, and I make eye contact with the image of David. Strong, wonderful, gentle David, with the black hair and the smile. Sorry, bro, I say, but you of all people should know how he can get. He's barely keeping it together. Seeing you, I stop, because seeing David's photo is one thing. Seeing David and thinking of him in connection with something else entirely. I hold the frame and take in the photos one at a time. And I trace the image of their wedding day, their matching rings, and how it was so weird to have a couple of kids marry right after high school, but how it seemed totally fitting because it was David and Robbie, and they would be together forever because they were one of the great love stories of all time. He's struggling, I say to David's picture, and I don't know how to help him. None of us knows. He's over all the time, and that's great, but I hear David finish the thought. But he's over for the wrong reasons. I nod. I have to do something. I put the picture back on the dresser and open the window to let in the evening air. The leaves of the tree outside rustle, and as I start to turn away, I see it. A monarch butterfly flitting between the branches. I hold my breath and exhale as it comes to rest on the windowsill. Hey, you're my confirmation, huh? David agrees. The butterfly does a slow flap of its wings, then disappears among the leaves. I go back downstairs, take the empty pop bowls and candy packages. Robbie's loading the dishwasher. And then they have a quick conversation because Tuna lied to Robbie about why she was upstairs. So we'll tread here. As Robbie leaves, I head to my room, then freeze in the doorway. Grandma's quilt is back on the bed. Did you bring up the quilt? I yelled a question downstairs. No, Mom's voice comes my way. Robbie must have left it. But he didn't. He came into my room to put it back. My gaze lifts from the bed to the dresser, which means he saw the collage. I step into my room, positive I hear the echoes of his wailing grief, but meet only the soft swish of my bare feet on carpet. The frame's been moved. Not a lot, but enough to confirm that Robbie touched it. Robbie touched something that held an image of David. If that's not an omen, then omens don't exist. I set the frame back in its original position and acknowledge the sign to my ancestors and David. And I promise them and myself that I will do all I can to help Robbie remember how to smile and laugh and maybe love again. So that is the intro for The Signs and Wonders of Tuna.
Won't you hold up that book? Won't you hold up the book again? Because it's got such a beautiful cover. How many words have you got in that book?
Ooh, 70,000-ish, I think. Yeah.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous cover. Oh my goodness. It really is.
It's just so lovely.
So nice.
Yeah, it's so lovely. I think let me just double check here. So I don't name the wrong illustrator, but I think it was Stephanie Singleton who did the illustration, and Stephanie Singleton, and she's amazing, obviously, right? She's absolutely amazing at what she does.
She absolutely is. You know, that cover is absolutely gorgeous. And the colors as well. The colors just blend so well together. You know, it's just a great choice in color. Did you publish that traditionally, or did you self-publish?
No, this is through Running Press Kids, which is part of the Rashad book group. And so it's traditionally published. And the team at Running Press Kids is just amazing. They're so lovely to work with. And they made this journey with Tuna just so much fun. And as writers, we know this, right? Like the whole path to publication can be fraught and anxiety filled, and they just made it a really fun ride.
That's good to know. So, and are all your books traditionally published, or did you self-publish some of them?
Yeah, I straddle. So there's a few books that were published pre 2014, and those books are self-published. So True Grime, The Not So Secret Adventures of Billy Vale, PI, at Doc's End. So those were me, and then the Guardian series and on up from 2014. Those have all been traditionally published books.
So, if somebody's watching now and they're trying to decide between the two, what are your thoughts on the two different experiences, self-publishing as opposed to getting traditionally published?
Yeah, that's a great question. The thing you're going to want to think about is things like, what's your time frame, right? Because traditional publishing is a long haul. So if you signed a contract today, your book's not going to be out for a year and a half to 2 years. So are you okay waiting for
That's
2 years
a
before
really
your
long
book is on the
time.
shelf? Yeah, and that's on the short side of it, right? It could be 3 or more. So are you okay waiting that length of time? Are you okay with the process? Because it may take 2 years before you find a traditional publisher who it wants to take on that book. So now you're looking at 4 years before you see your book on the shelf. So you want to ask yourself questions like that. What's my time frame? Is my book something that is for like a general audience, or is it for a niche audience? Because if it's for a niche audience, maybe what I want to do is self-publish, because that's going to give me more control, and because I've got a smaller sort of like readership that I'm going for, it's going to save me all this time, because trying to find a publisher who wants to do this very particular kind of story might add another 2 years. So I'm going to be looking at 6 years before I see my book on the shelf. So you want to think about things like that. You want to think about like artistic control. As an independent publisher, you have 100% control, which is amazing, but you also have 100% responsibility. So you have to hire an editor to take care of, your content. You have to hire someone who's going to do the formatting to make sure that the pages look beautiful. And who are you going to hire for the cover art? And then how are you going to go out marketing and finding publicity? So it's a lot of control, but it's a lot of responsibility. And again, it's going to come back to what lifts you up. I always say that to writers. There's no mandate that you have to be a published writer. There's no mandate that you have to be an independently published writer. It's whatever makes you feel strong in yourself and gives you full that like creative like core strength kind of thing. That's where you always want to lean into.
So you almost say you want to work backwards. Like, what is the outcome that you are seeking? And from there, decide what is going to work best for me, self-publishing or traditional publishing. And the time factor is important. I know that a lot of people wrote books, for example, during the pandemic, and they may have had a relevance for that time period. So in that, given that short time frame, self-publishing would have been your best option to get it out there fast. And I think a
Yes,
lot of
yeah,
people actually
absolutely.
went that route during the pandemic. It was amazing how many pandemic books we had. um,
It's true.
People that felt they didn't have the time before to write, because they were in isolation, and because sometimes people felt they now had more time on their hands. They took the opportunity to write, and for regular authors, it was a different writing experience, because a lot of authors seek outward stimuli of some sort, and now they were locked in their home office or studio and had to write under different writing conditions without getting that inspiration from outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So it was
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, the pandemic, I think, gave people a lot of space to explore their creativity. And now that the world is starting back up again, it's just a matter of sorting out how you maintain your creativity amidst the fact that now you've got to go to the office instead of getting to work from home. So, do you want to forget about, commuting into work and you're going to take the train or the bus because that gives you a chance to work on your manuscript while you're driving in, or do you want to stay in your car because you can turn on the recording device on your phone and then just, orally tell yourself the story, and then when you get home you can transcribe it. So things have shifted, but for creatives, there's where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. We definitely pivoted, and I don't think we're ever quite going back to where we were pre-pandemic. But again, it has opened up several opportunities, and it's opened our eyes to other opportunities we may not have looked at as creatives. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Millie and the great drought. Welcome back. You are watching Books with Bridgetti, and we're talking to Natasha Deen, and her next book is Millie and the Great Drought. Where did the idea for this book come from, and why did you want to write it?
Oh, well, the idea came from my amazing publishers, Capstone and Stone Arch Books, and my editor approached me and said, "Hey, would you ever want to write a story about the Great Drought?" And I went, "Yeah, who doesn't want to write a story about the Great Drought?" And that's how it started. I just started researching the 1930s, the Midwest Dust Bowl in the States, and it's amazing how we kind of repeat environmental moments, like right now where we're dealing with climate change, and back then, they were for a want of proper farming knowledge. These new farmers who'd never owned land, never tilled soil, and didn't know what they were doing, and were being led astray in certain cases by government and what have you, who said, no, just keep tilling, cut down all the trees, and get that farmland going. And of course, you cut down the trees, there's nothing to hold the soil, and suddenly there's these giant dust storms. I think the biggest one was April 15th, and they called it Black Sunday, because people genuinely thought the world was ending because the storm was so significant. And I remember watching a documentary with these people who are in their 80s talking about when they're small children, and their family members, their parents, their grandparents were like calling them into the house. And one, there was more than one person who said, "And my grandmother told me to get on my knees and start praying because it was the end of the world." And I thought, how do you, what a traumatic thing to go through as a small child, thinking the world was ending because the world turned black, like it covered the sun.
Very frightening experience for a child. So tell me about the cover of this book.
Oh, that is all Capstone, and the illustrator, they just do great work. So they just, they set, let me just make sure I'm just going to say her name properly. Wendy Tan. You
want to hold
Wendy
the book up?
with the editors.
Can you hold up the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so Wendy Tan is the illustrator.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you there when you were the cover.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say that she worked with the design department and the editors, and they would put in the notes, and then she would draw the illustrations, and then we would get them back. And I had an opportunity to, make little tiny suggestions. I think at one point, it was like, oh, I think the dresses changed, or, the hair is different. And then, yeah, but her artwork, if I can just hold it up, is just amazing. Like, this is, when you think about the level of energy and emotion and just dynamic movement that she can create in her illustrations. It's just gorgeous. Like she's just an absolutely
it's very,
gorgeous
very
illustrator.
realistic, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could. I mean, I'm an adult. I feel the fear in those illustrations. Absolutely.
Just really, when you look at the illustrations, you kind of just get a sense, like, I'm there. I can almost feel what the energy or lack of energy in the air must have felt like at that
Yeah.
moment in time. Um, you know, for you as a writer, what did it feel like writing that story, something that was so significant in history, and being able to retell that story must have been an incredible feeling for you.
Yeah, I felt it's it's a huge honor to be able to like write historical fiction, right? Because you are taking things that have happened in history and then you are doing your best to honor those people and those experiences that are inspiring your characters. Um, and so it was, in that sense, it was joyful, and I don't know if the word is sacred, but like just like that idea of the responsibility you carry. But it was also, incredibly hard because there was kind of no happy ending per se when I would do the research and you just would read about the extreme conditions and just the horrific things that people were having to live through, like truly horrific stuff that um, I would never talk about because it hurts my heart that I had to read this, let alone living with the knowledge that I know this because this is someone who's saying this is a thing that happened to me. But just families just losing everything. And so in that sense, it was really sad. And I think for any of us who are writing very serious topics or very sort of traumatic topics, it's really important for us to practice a certain level of, like, a higher level of self-care, because in order to tell the story authentically, we have to relive and live through these experiences. But at the same time, because we're doing this, it's also really important to like have those moments when we walk away, have those moments where we're decompressing and taking a breath and like, talking to someone and talking it through about what we've just had to sort of live through in writing this, so that we don't carry those negative feelings. We're not carrying it with us longer than we should.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about honoring the people who had lived through that in the manner that you're telling the story, so that it doesn't show any disrespect for the suffering that went on at that time. Would you mind reading us an excerpt from your book? Would that be?
Yes, absolutely. So this is Monday, April 8th, and Millie, everybody, she lives in Cimarron County, which is where they think is where like it was like ground zero for where the Dust Bowls began. And she's just like, all her friends are leaving, everybody's leaving, and she's just lost her best friend. They've moved. So this is how it starts. A week later, I walked home alone. Betty and her father had left town heading for California, along with two other families who'd been forced to abandon their homes. Everything was getting worse, including the fights between my parents. Pa kept saying we should stay, that the rains would come. But like Ma, I knew we should leave. Only I couldn't find the words to say so. Even if I had the words, I didn't have the courage. As I walked along the road, a change crackled around me. The air turned dry and staticky and set my heart racing. Another storm was coming. I spun, trying not to panic, and looked for shelter, but there was no place to hide. Everything was in the open. Think, Millie, think. I couldn't run. Dust storms could block the sun and turn day into night. People had gotten lost, or worse, because they couldn't see their way. Staying on the side of the road was equally dangerous. If a car came my way and the driver couldn't see me in the storm, I'd get hit. The wind hummed with the impending storm, and I was out of time. There was only one thing I could do. I jumped into a ditch, got on my hands and knees, and hunkered down. The storm hit, blasting me with sand and dirt, and pebbles pinged off my body. Broken brambles and pieces of tumbleweeds battered my skin. The wind screamed, and in the distance, a car horn blared. Tires squealed. I bolted upright, my body tense to run, and blinked hard, squinting to spot the vehicle. Another blare of the horn, then the sickening crunch of metal crushing into something. I stumbled back and landed in the dirt. My lungs burned. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the tears leaked out, mixing with dirt and turning to mud. The cuts on my face and arms stung from the dust and tears. I curled into a ball as the storm raged on. All I wanted to do was for things to go back to normal when the field grew crops and the rains fell. I missed the feeling of clean sheets on my skin. I missed being outside without being afraid. Dust swept alongside of me, and I pressed my face into my thigh. The dirt blew higher and higher until I was sure it was going to bury me alive. And that's Millie.
Oh my goodness, that is so beautiful. Wow, wow. You
Yeah.
literally sort of, I think just, your style of writing just kind of hooks the reader. And, I mean, I just felt I could listen to you forever. It really just
Thank
gripped
you.
me.
Thank you. Yeah, and when she talks about the missing of clean sheets, this was something because the homes at that time, the way they were built, there was a constant trickle of dust, so you were never clean, like never. And people would dry their clothing and stuff on the lines outside. So you'd have these women who are spending all this time and they're washing, and then they put it out, and the clothing is drying, and then a dust storm hits, and it's done. And there were women who were driven to terrible, terrible choices because they just had huge breakdowns because they couldn't keep anything clean. They couldn't keep up, like you were eating dirt every time, even if you covered your dinner with cloth, the dust got everywhere. And for Millie and her family, they end up migrating to California because they're told that that's where the jobs are. And it was quite the thing when I was researching and reading all of the stuff where Americans were turning on other Americans, and this idea that you were dirty Okies and migrants from the Midwest were bringing crime and disease. And in LA, there was the police chief had 100 officers whose only job was to deny their fellow citizens entry into LA. And that's always stuck with me. They were living in shanty towns, and people would come in and set fire to the shanty towns. So it was a really, really hard time that a lot of Americans went through, because that was right on top of the Depression at the same time. So it was a very, very terrible time. And the resilience, that was the thing that caught me too, was the resilience. And I'm trying not to get emotional about it, but just the sheer force of will that they were going to get over this, and the way that they would band together and help out one another against these terrible forces and against this sort of terrible ignorance that came at them. And it's definitely a story that obviously you can see that still quite sticks with me.
Yeah. It's amazing how in times of adversity, people rally together and want to help one another and strengthen relationships. Regardless of what happened in the past, when you live through something like that, I was reminded of that during the pandemic. And for me, this was we've never in our lifetime experienced something on a global scale like the pandemic we've just lived through. So many shared experiences. And I kept thinking of people who lived through the other world wars, and it's it was different, but we were all suffering at the same time on a global scale. In our lifetime, we've never witnessed anything like this. It was truly phenomenal. The amount of pain and suffering that the pandemic inflicted on us, I don't think we'll ever forget what that was like, being in hard lockdown, losing people we care about. I remember a time where I had memorial services every single Saturday, sometimes 2 or 3 a
Mm,
day. And I'd keep wondering,
yeah,
can I just get a break from constantly feeling that it was just a constant grieving period for not
yeah, it
just one
was.
person, but multiple people. It was a huge thing in our history. So,
Yeah, it
you
really was.
feel for people like that.
Yeah, yeah, because I think, Bridget, we were also grieving the loss of the life we knew, and the knowledge that life could change so quickly. And I mean, when you think about how many people lost loved ones that they couldn't attend the funerals, they couldn't be there when that person passed. There's such a lack of resolution. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of us, it's going to take um, a lot of self-care and talking to, appropriate professionals, and a lot of time to sort of get back to that sense of who we were. And I don't know that I think there's always going to be like a little bit of an outline, right? Like a little bit of a COVID outline or a little bit of COVID shading, because we've realized how precious life can be and how quickly that can change. Our lifestyles can change.
I know, in an instant. I mean, I still remember here in South Africa, for example, when they announced that we'd go into COVID lockdown for 2 weeks, and we thought
Hmm.
it was actually quite fun at the time being in lockdown,
Yes.
um, for 2 weeks, but that's what we envisioned. Little did we know that that was going to last for over 2 years. No one
Yeah.
foreseen how those events would unfold from the beginning. It's kind of like a constantly evolving thing that we could never keep up with. It was really, really difficult. Before we close, I want to ask you very quickly, what has your approach been to marketing with your books? Do you have a publicist, and how did COVID affect marketing?
Oh, so I have so because I'm with traditional publishers, I have a publicist that works with me through those publishers. I also have a dedicated publicist, that's Mickey Mickelson from Creative Edge. And so we all sort of work in concert. I would say that the cool thing is what you were saying in the beginning, that because now we've all learned the technology, and cross fingers when technology works for us, we're able to beam into each other's areas without having to travel. And it's sort of, to me, it's expanded out the connections and the very interesting and cool people I get to meet. And honestly, whenever people ask me like, well, what's your number one marketing tip? My number one marketing tip is write a book that's worth reading, and write a book that readers will love so much they talk about. Because at the end of the day, I mean, how many of us have found some amazing book because some friend pressed it into our hand and said, "Oh, you've got to read this book. It is so amazing." And how many times have we done that to someone? "Oh, did you read this? Oh, you haven't read this book? Oh my gosh, you've got to read this book." It's like, like that to me, getting someone excited about my work, that's my number one go-to. It's why I do the long hours and do the endless. I think that's why we all do the endless drafts, because we want to have something that is worth someone's time, that they are, they could be doing anything else, but right now in that moment they're sitting down with my book, and I want to be worthy of that.
Oh my goodness, that is possibly the best marketing tip I've heard. I, that is that is without a doubt the best marketing tip I have heard.
Hurrah.
Well done. Oh my goodness. No one else has ever said that. I've had people say, write so that people can't put the book down and they just want to turn the page. But you've kind of encapsulated that and said, just make sure your entire book is so good that people promote it for you.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That is a brilliant note. Natasha, thank you so much. This is such a great note on which to end this interview on, with that fantastic group. So there you go. That's the big takeaway from today. Write a book that is so good that people will want to market it for you. Natasha, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back again. What's next for you, by the way? What's next for you before we say goodbye?
Oh, well, I'm continuing on in my Lark Boss series. That's for readers who are around 8, like 6 to 8, 7 to 9. They're really fun mysteries that teach idioms, so like ants in your pants and all those kinds of things. And then working on a follow-up novel for Tuna. So I have an idea. Now I just gotta be patient with myself and write it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. A huge big thank you to our audience, our live audience today. And also, if you're catching this on the replay, thank you so much. This was amazing. Take care, everyone. We'll see you back on the next episode of Books with Bridgetti.